Let's start first with our pledge. Well, I'm sorry, Jerry, I didn't mean to interrupt you in the center. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And you know what, also, let's spend a minute in the silent reflection prayer, especially for our vets. And also in Morristown, Morris County, we just lost one of our own, Ed Ramirez, who was a former GOP chairman, a long-time political stalwart of this area, and his sudden death he will be missed. He's survived by his wife Christine and kids. So for Ed Ramirez as well, let's just take a minute. Okay, thank you. Last week, I was invited by the gentleman who I will be introducing now to a fundraiser and tribute that was given by the New Jersey Senate Minority Leader Tom Kean. Politicians and regular folks came from all over New Jersey. I was really proud to have been invited. Thank you very much, Joe. They spent a lot of money to pay tribute to this outstanding legislator and somebody I'm proud and pleased to call a friend. For the record, Joseph Jersey Joe Pennacchio is Senator of the 26th Legislative District. He has a history of championing causes for the underdog and regular folks. He is an advocate, among others, school choice, pro-life, Second Amendment, open space, and I will underline transparency are among his battles and his causes. In his other life, Joe was a dentist, a husband, father, grandfather, in short, the total package. And oh, by the way, he was just named by Politicker NJ as the smartest legislator in New Jersey.
Oh.
It's my great pleasure to introduce Joe Pennacchio. Senator, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Jeff, for those kind words and that introduction. What an exceptional crowd we have here today. Exceptional. American exceptionalism. Those are words that you will never hear come out of President Obama's mouth. He doesn't buy into it. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. President Obama has been on an apology tour since the day that he took office. He believes in apologizing for his perceptions of our transgressions and our faults. Whatever issues we have as Americans, Americans can fix those issues if we had the proper political and moral leadership in the White House. Obviously, we don't. I do believe that we are an exceptional country, and let me tell you why. Normally, historically, countries were formed from a commonality based on religion, culture, nationality, race. Our country was the first country that was ever formed based on an idea. The idea that God created us with inalienable rights. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And government was going to guarantee those rights. No other country in the history of humankind was ever created with that idea. That is the basis for our exceptionalism. That is the basis for our American dream. I thank God every day that I was born into that country because I've lived that American dream. Not only myself, but this was a country that saw the likes of a poor country boy from Illinois, self-taught lawyer, become our 16th and greatest president. That allowed Harry Truman, a haberdasher, a salesman from Missouri, become president and lead us out of World War II. These men of modest means standing side by side with the likes of the Kennedys and the Roosevelts, men of extraordinary wealth and means. Yet all of these men, their contributions no less for the service of their country. And it wasn't just in politics that this happened. Men and women, past, present, and no doubt future, all making terrific contributions. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, all men of modest means, and they managed to change not only American history, but the course of human history. Frederick Douglass was born a slave, and yet he became one of our greatest civil rights leaders. We just tipped our hat to Derek Jeter, a modest man, but who better to have donned the uniform of baseball than Babe Ruth? And the Babe was raised in an orphanage. Helen Keller, if it wasn't that she had been born in America in that era, because of her disability, she may have been consigned to an insane asylum. Humanity would have been the less for it. The American dream, the ability to have your talents through hard work and effort and limit only by your imaginations to take you to reach the highest of your human potential. And no other country in the history of the world has been any better at it. I thank God I was born in America. I served side by side with Senator Tom Kean, a good friend, great state senator, great family. His dad was governor. My dad, immigrant, factory worker. Yet their children, their sons, side by side in New Jersey State Senate. No other place in America could that have happened. I make no apologies, unlike the president, for our American exceptionalism. I thank God I was born into this country. And I thank you all for taking the time out of a very busy football Sunday to be here and to listen to those few remarks. God bless you all, and God bless this greatest country that God has ever put on the face of the earth.
Sure. Anybody have any questions about either this district or New Jersey or their teeth?
Rabbi?
Hi.
Hey, Joe, is it?
The Democrats have an overwhelming majority in both chambers. I'm wondering if you see a possibility that the Republicans can get together and offer a powerful school choice program that would entice Democrats in the districts, most of the Democrat districts, to come over on our side because it would help their children who are suffering in failing schools and really not getting an education. It's costing $30,000 a lot of these places. You give them a voucher that's half the price, 15, let's say, for 30. I mean, they'd come, we'd be like Reagan, you know, we'd get the Democrat to turn to Republican side.
Rabbi, Democrats don't care about people, they care about votes. And that's a perfect example. Those kids in those urban areas are hurting. And I'm not one to say let's have a carte blanche school voucher program for the entire state. But let's start with the failing school districts. Why would you say no to that? Unless those kids don't vote, but the education industry that allows that to happen, they do vote, and they also supply a lot of money and a lot of manpower in order to get them elected. Those are key issues. That's an absolutely key issue that I think we should be banging over the heads of our Democrat friends in order to win future elections. We are not as blue a state as people would make us out to be. Historically, legislative races, we get over 50% of the race, of the votes. Unfortunately, we only have about 40% of the seats that are there. We can thank whatever legislative map drawing process was allowed to happen the last couple of cycles for that to happen. We have a governor that's a Republican in a blue state. What we do have, hopefully, is a message, and I believe in that message, and that's part of that message. So if we can get good, solid Republican leaders to keep talking about that message, regardless whether you may not win the first time, but you will win eventually based on the message, that's how we start to make inroads. And pray that we get a better map next time. Yes, sir.
When was the last time if ever Jersey was red? Colonial days?
Well, when I first came into the legislature, Don DeFrancesco was taking over the last remnants of Christy Whitman's last year. She got bumped up into Washington. I served for the first 9 months in a Republican-controlled legislature. And then it turned over when McGreevey came to Democrat. I think the Senate took 2 more years for that to happen. So we really haven't had we haven't had full control for well over 12 years now.
Any ideas how to reverse that?
Same answer that we gave to the rabbi. Message, 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 message.
coming here, listening to people like our great guests, and sharing this with your neighbors, and being enthusiastic and say, you know what? Forget about the crap that you hear on the radio or see on TV. This is the real deal, and use your common sense. You must have seen terrible news things that some teachers want to take the pledge that we just did, take in God, under God out of it. Talk about not American exceptionalism, but Muslim exceptionalism. And I have nothing against any religion, but this is a Judeo-Christian country, and the fact that our president doesn't want to recognize it, we all grew up recognizing that. So we have to get back to traditional values irrespective of party.
You have a Twitter account?
Twitter?
You have a Twitter account?
I don't, actually, the state Republican office tweets for me. I don't tweet. I do have a Facebook account. Yes, sir.
Senator, I'm a committeeman up in Bergen County. I'm a
Welcome.
member of the Tea Party, and in front of Mike Doherty sits down here. And I find it difficult, we have the so-called moderate Republicans, rhinos that come, many of whom you serve with, and I think it's impossible to get a conservative, a true conservative elected in New Jersey or nationally, because we're considered out of the loop. And if we split the vote, and they want to, they're not in alignment with our principles, as you so eloquently pointed out. And I find it difficult unless they go to the third party, in which case we're never going to win.
Well, this is a thought that I want to leave you. Democrats don't play that game. There are Democrats of reason. Right now, the Liberal Party's taken over that party, there's no doubt. But they speak with one voice. We, based on principles, which we should have, we're not willing to compromise. And something, quite frankly, shouldn't be compromised, but one thing that we should be willing to do is win.
Yes.
So if we're going to start fighting amongst ourselves, instead of getting 3/4 of a loaf or half a loaf, you're going to get nothing. And I can tell you from experience, when you're in a minority down in Trenton, you get nothing, basically. I'd be happy to get half of that. Instead of arguing about the stuff as conservatives and as rhinos, as moderates, instead of arguing about the stuff that we disagree on, which is maybe 5%, why don't we spend 95% talking about the 95% of the stuff that we do agree on? You can't do anything unless you have control of the legislative process or control of Washington. You can't do anything. So maybe sometimes there's got to be some compromise. And as much as I love my Tea Party friends, one thing that we have to learn how to do, and I said we, okay, we have to learn how to become pragmatic, and we have to learn how to take principles and change them into policies. And you just can't do this and have that happen. You've got to talk to the other side, but more importantly, you have to talk within the ranks of your own party.
Thank you very much.
I closed the door for the noise.
Oh, for the noise, oh, okay. I think, as the Senator just alluded, we are losing enthusiasm factor, and in large part, it's due to our belief that our right-of-center radio and TV show friends and pundits are expressing the view of a wider audience. And yet, if Pew just came out with a poll that showed less than 15% of Americans know or care about the midterm elections. And I have unofficially gone to malls around the state, and I found that less than half of people even know what Tea Party movement is, as incredible as that may seem. So if we hear 5 pundits expressing our views and nod our heads in agreement, we feel like our views are growing. But remember the last presidential polls, which showed that we were going to welcome President Romney. They are in the entertainment business, and for the most part, their first thought, and God bless them, because I'm a capitalist, their first thought is making money and increasing their bottom line. Let's not conflate that being an entertainer with being a political leader. All too often, when someone appears on one of the Fox shows as a contributor for their first time, very often I followed up their appearance with a phone call. And the first question I get from these folks is, yeah, and how much is my honorarium? Unfortunate. So having said that, with one exception, I want you to know that the folks who have appeared here over these 6 years do so at their own expense, or on the rare occasion, we will reimburse gas money. So folks that you see here really are the committed ones. They do believe, because they're here on their own dime, they're here because they believe in their message, and they believe that you are the ones who are going to take this message and carry it far. Further proof of what I just said, if the folks that we look up to all too often and revere and applaud on the talk radio and Fox, if they really believed what they said, they'd be calling me up, they'd be calling Frank up, they'd be calling other leaders up and saying, hey, when can I appear at your group? When can we have a meeting? Instead, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's famous jurist that says, yeah, I'd be glad to come, and we'll even give you a break in the price. We'll lower our appearance fee to $10,000. Normally, I guess it's 25 or something like that. Again, I say God bless because they can get it, but by the same token, I don't believe that they are really committed to the cause. I believe they are committed to being stars in the entertainment business. You, all of you, and all of your friends and contacts, and all of the people with whom you correspond, you are the real leaders, and you are the reason that there will be change, and that we will elect, and God willing, keep electing our friends to the offices for which they run, Senator and Congressman. Also, having said this, we can't keep only bashing POTUS, as gratifying and satisfying as that is, because Lord knows he deserves all the criticism we could throw at him. But we need enthusiasm for our own politicians and our own policies. We have to have a clear path of what we want to do, and hopefully our politicians will let us know, we spread the word, and that is why we vote for the folks that we do. So we have to come together. The President has drawn another line in the sand, but this one isn't in Syria. It's here in America, and it expires on November 4th. He has challenged voters and Americans. He has said that when you all go to the polls, remember that while he isn't running, thank God, his policies are on the ballot, every one of them. Please tell all your friends and all the people you know to take that thought with them when they go to vote. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next guest. Congressman Leonard is our congressman from New Jersey's 7th Congressional District. He is Israel, an ardent supporter of school choice, and is an increasingly important member of the House of Representatives Committee on Energy and Commerce. We are really pleased to have him here, especially because Ebola is perhaps one of the first words on everybody's minds. And Congressman Lance is having a meeting on, your committee is having a meeting on Thursday, examining the U.S. public health response to the Ebola outbreak. So actually, you are getting a preview of what will be happening in the inner workings on Congress on Thursday. With that, we are really pleased and proud to welcome our friend, Congressman Leonard Lance.
Thank you, Jeff, and good afternoon to you all. And first of all, do you agree with me that Jeff does a terrific job, ladies and gentlemen? Before I discuss national issues, I'd like to address the excellent question that you raised regarding when was New Jersey red? Senator Pennacchio is so young that he will not recall this, but I can recall this with great vividness. We won the presidency in New Jersey 6 times in a row. President Nixon in 1968, in a very close election, won New Jersey by about 60,000 votes. And then President Nixon again in 1972 in a tremendous landslide. And then President Ford, who lost the national election, won New Jersey in 1976. And sometimes people forget that. And then, of course, Ronald Reagan won it overwhelmingly twice. And then the first George Bush, George H.W. Bush, won it in 1988. 68, 72, 76, 80, 84, 88. 6 elections in a row. We were considered one of the bellwether states across the nation. However, in recent times, we have lost it 6 times in a row. 1992, 1996, 2000, 2004, 2008, and 2012. The question for 2016, it seems to me, is whether or not we can win here in New Jersey. And if we do win in New Jersey, we will clearly win the presidency across the nation. And I think that we have a chance of returning New Jersey to the Republican column in 2016. And we can...
Wait, that deserves a round of applause.
And we should be of good cheer. And we certainly should be of good cheer in this year of 2014. Because, ladies and gentlemen, 3 weeks and 2 days and 6 hours from now, we are going to win a tremendous landslide across the entire United States of America.
Yeah.
I had the honor of serving in the legislature with Senator Pennacchio. I was the minority leader in the state Senate before Senator Kane, Tom Kane Jr., who is my successor as minority leader. As I'm sure Joe has heard me say before, and certainly as Tom has heard me say, I hope the same thing happens to Tom Kane that happened to me when I was minority leader. May his hair turn as gray as mine did when I was minority leader. Because minority leader is a wonderful position, but it's not nearly as good as being president of the state Senate, ladies and gentlemen. And how are we going to get a majority in the legislature? Next year, 2015, is an election only for the General Assembly, not the state Senate. And the top of the ballot next year, in 2015, here in New Jersey, will be the General Assembly. It happens only twice in every 20-year period. It happens in 2015 and then in 2019, and it doesn't happen again until 2035. Next year is an excellent opportunity to have our views prevail in the General Assembly, because we will be the motivated voters next year. Republicans, mainstream Republicans, Tea Party Republicans, Republicans in general, and I believe there is an opportunity for us next year to take control of the lower house of the New Jersey legislature, because I think that we will have the motivation, because it will be the General Assembly that will be at the top of the ballot. And then that leads to 2016, where I think we can be competitive in the presidential race here in New Jersey, and that leads to 2017, when we will be electing a new governor, because Governor Christie cannot run for re-election as governor. Of course, if he becomes president, he will have left the governorship, but even if that does not occur, in 2017 he is term limited. The Assembly will be on the ballot with the gubernatorial candidate, as will the state Senate. And then moving forward beyond that, we have to have a better map once the census occurs. In New Jersey, we have 2 reapportionment commissions, one for the state legislature and then a second one for the Congress. And this occurs after every decennial census. And the Legislative Apportionment Commission is in operation first, because that will be for the elections in 2021 and then for Congress in 2022. This may sound very technical, but this is how elections are won or lost. And when we next reapportion the state legislature, there'll be Democratic members of the Apportionment Commission, there'll be Republican members of the Apportionment Commission, and critically, there will be a tiebreaker. And the tiebreaker chosen last time, Alan Rosenthal, now deceased, for the legislative districts, voted with the Democrats. We have to make sure next time that the tiebreaker is someone who gives our side a fighting chance so that we might have legislative districts that represent the state as a whole. Let me say on the congressional reapportionment that occurred in 2012, we won. The tiebreaker was John Farmer, the former Attorney General of New Jersey. And the map he chose was the Republican map. And that is why today there are 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats in the House of Representatives. And we lost a congressional seat. We went from 13 to 12, based upon the fact that the population increase in this state had not been as great in the first decade as the country as a whole. The demographers tell us we will not lose another seat in 2022, so we're set for 20 years in the congressional field of the House of Representatives, and I hope again that we can have at least 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans, and I would like more Republicans than 6, but we should be of good cheer because we, in effect, won the congressional reapportionment for this decade. And as you know, 2 districts were merged together, Congressman Pascrell and Congressman Rothman, to those who are from Bergen County, and it could have been that 2 Republican districts might have been merged together, but that did not occur. And so we won the congressional reapportionment, we did not win the legislative reapportionment, and we have to move forward to make New Jersey more competitive, and that is a way to do it. Before we get to 2015 or 2016 or 2017, let's talk about 2014. Let's talk about the Republican candidate for United States Senate, my friend Jeff Bell. Let's all go out and work for Jeff Bell between now and Election Day. And the polls are not that too far apart. Jeff Bell is the underdog, but he is not that far behind, and I hope that you are as vigorous as possible in supporting Jeff Bell. And the incumbent senator, who's only been in office 1 year, has agreed, as I understand it, only to 1 debate at the very end of the campaign. I think that we should talk up the candidacy of Jeff Bell, because I do think that he has a chance to be elected to the United States Senate from New Jersey, and if he is elected, he will be an excellent United States Senator. Regarding the elections across the nation, the last time there was an election for the House, 2 years ago, in 2012, our side won 234 seats across the nation. And we're in the majority. And thank goodness we are in the majority, because we are the only brake on an expansive federal government as proposed by President Obama and the Democrats in the U.S. Senate. 234. I predict here this afternoon, with 3 weeks to go, that we are going to gain seats in the United States House of Representatives, ladies and gentlemen. As I understand it, the high watermark of the last 80 years or so was the congressional election in 1946, the famous Republican landslide of 1946. And in that year, we gained 248 seats in the House. We won 234 last time. Our high water mark was 248. I hope, optimistically, that we might be able to reach that high water mark, winning 14 more seats to the level of our great victory in 1946. We're certainly going to gain seats, and it would be of historic importance if we could reach that milestone. But in any event, we're going to gain seats in the House. And now regarding the U.S. Senate, critically important, where we have at the moment 45 seats, and we obviously need to get to 51. Mr. Bell has just entered the room. Before you entered, Jeff, I was speaking positively and optimistically about your candidacy. If we are so fortunate as to have Jeff win, that will bring us to 46 from 45. And then I predict here this afternoon we're going to win in West Virginia and Montana and South Dakota. There is a developing situation in South Dakota, but we're going to overcome that with a third-party candidate, and we are going to win South Dakota, as well as Montana, as well as West Virginia. My close friend Shelley Moore Capito is going to become the new U.S. Senator in West Virginia, the first Republican in more than 50 years. I asked Shelley recently on the floor of the House, Shelley, when you go over to the U.S. Senate, will you ever talk to me again? And she said no. I said, not even when you come over to the House for the State of the Union address, will you wave? She said she'd think about it. We're going to win those 3 seats. So with Jeff's election, that gets us to 49. We have to get to 51. We have excellent opportunities in North Carolina, in Arkansas with a colleague of mine, Congressman Cotton, in Louisiana with a very close friend of mine, Congressman and medical doctor Cassidy. And I think for sure we're going to win in Arkansas and in Louisiana. I hope we win in North Carolina. We also have an excellent opportunity in Iowa, and a young man who began his political career as an intern in my office from outside Clinton, New Jersey in Hunterdon County, is running the Ernst campaign in Iowa. And I think we have an excellent chance there. And we also have an excellent chance in Alaska and in Colorado. And another colleague of mine, Cory Gardner, is running in Colorado. And Cory Gardner and Bill Cassidy and I serve together on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And lo and behold, this weekend, the Denver Post, not known as a newspaper particularly supportive of Republicans, the democratically leaning Denver Post this weekend endorsed Cory Gardner, Republican, for United States Senate in Colorado. And we're also going to retain the seats in Georgia and in Kentucky. And regarding the Kentucky race, and I find this the most amusing anywhere in America, the Democratic candidate in Kentucky refuses to say whether or not she voted for President Obama. What she did say was that she had been a delegate to the Democratic Convention in 2008 for Hillary Clinton. So be it. She was. She was also a Democratic delegate in 2012 for Barack Obama. However, she doesn't point that out to her potential constituents in Kentucky. And so I think that we're going to do a very good job there as well. Regarding Ebola, and Jeff did mention Ebola, I signed a letter to the President on October 7th with Richard Nugent, who's a member from Florida, Michael Burgess, who is a member from Texas and is also a medical doctor, Jimmy Duncan of Tennessee, Scott Garrett, my colleague and friend here in New Jersey, George Holding from North Carolina, Jackie Walorski of Indiana, a very fine new member, and I together signed a letter. And what we want is a comprehensive policy from this administration on Ebola. And let's hope moving forward that the President and the administration bring about a comprehensive policy. And this should not be a partisan matter.
No.
There is not a Republican way to fight Ebola or a Democratic way to fight Ebola. I hope this audience agrees with me. There should be a united American way to fight Ebola. I want to raise another topic very briefly, and I know the group is waiting to hear from our next U.S. Senator. But the President of the United States suggested that unilaterally he might change the situation regarding Guantanamo. Even though Congress has repeatedly said that those at Guantanamo should not come into this country, and we placed it in statute. Now, the President used to teach constitutional law at the University of Chicago Law School. He must be aware that the only way to change statutory law in this country is through an act of Congress. He has enormous power, but he does not have the power to change statutory law. That is our responsibility in the Congress of the United States. And let's hope that he rereads the Constitution of the United States regarding so many issues, but in particular regarding Guantanamo. I have been at Guantanamo. I flew there with Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma several years ago. And to fly there, you have to fly below Cuba and then back up because you cannot invade Cuban airspace. And my wife wanted me to call her the instant I returned to the United States of America because she was concerned about our flight to and from Guantanamo. The facility in Guantanamo is perfectly appropriate. It is first rate. As I have said previously, it's better than my dormitories at Lehigh or Princeton. I see a Lehigh cap in the back of the room. I hope Lehigh beats Lafayette at the 150th game at Yankee Stadium on November 22nd. I want you to know I have a twin brother and a late father who went to Lafayette, so I'm the black sheep in the family, but I'll be rooting for Lehigh. There is nothing wrong with the facility at Guantanamo, and I hope you agree with me that those who are housed there should stay there, ladies and gentlemen. I will end where I began. This is going to be a tremendous Republican year. We are going to continue to control and increase our majority in the House. We are going to gain seats in the Senate and, in my judgment, go into the majority in the Senate. After 6 years of this presidency, it is time to have better governance in the United States. And already Democrats are blaming each other. That is always a good sign in a political year. And this weekend, in an article about the blame game, an unnamed high Democratic consultant said that following this election, regarding the president's staff, that, quote, the president should take a flamethrower to his office. If that is occurring already, then this is going to be a terrific year for us. Please keep the faith be positive and optimistic so that on election night, 3 weeks and 2 days from now, we can all celebrate a tremendous victory together. Thank you very much, ladies
Here,
and
here.
I'll be happy to take a couple of questions. Rabbi.
Similar question. How we could win many, many Democrats over to our side in this election in 2014 if we would just have a sponsor, and I know it's got to come from the House Committee, Education and Workforce Committee. But after we heard from Congressman Scott Garrett that he likes the idea
Yes.
of the bill to provide a voucher just for DC
Yes.
kids,
Yes.
half of what they're spending. They're
Yes,
spending
yes,
He said he likes it. Get someone on the House Committee.
yes.
We've identified 15 on the
Yes.
House Committee that say on their website they're for school choice.
Yes,
and
Rabbi.
And I'm just wondering if you have any friends there on the committee, the House Committee, that you could encourage to join together, sponsor this bill now before the election and win millions of Democrat votes.
Thank you, Rabbi. I do not believe at the moment there is a Republican from New Jersey on the Education Committee.
Right.
I would have to look. I do not
Right,
believe there's a
there's not.
Republican.
No, the Democrat.
And I will look at the roster to see who might be close friends of mine, because I do have close friends from all across the country in the House, as to who on the Education Committee might be a close friend of mine. I favor absolutely vouchers in Washington, D.C. I favor what Michelle Rhee was doing, and of course there's the belief that obviously Washington has had traditionally a failed school system. Obviously vouchers would be a positive development, and Mr. Boehner, the Speaker, used to be chairman of the Education Committee, and he certainly favors the concept. And so I will look to see who on the roster of the committee is a close friend of mine, and I think we should keep up our good work together. This is an issue that unites Republicans, and this is an issue that divides Democrats. There are some Democrats who agree with us that it's essential, particularly in the inner urban centers where the educational system has failed children, and all children in America deserve to have the opportunity to be well educated. Yes, sir.
Does the Congress have a sense of how Dan Bongino's doing in Maryland?
I do not know the answer to that. Our member from Maryland is Dr. Harris from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. This is a gentleman who's running for Congress?
Bongino ran for Senate last time around and lost. He's a Secret Service agent, New York City
I
police
see.
officer.
I see. This was against Senator Cardin?
I don't recall.
Maryland is unfortunately quite a blue state, but I don't want to give up on Maryland either. And certainly we want to re-elect Congressman Harris, who sometimes sits by me as we vote on the floor of the House. Unfortunately, he just tragically lost his wife at a very young age, and he's an excellent member of the House. Other questions? The gentleman in the back, yes.
I just have one question. This has come up a couple of times. If the Republicans get the majority in both houses,
Yes, sir.
now I do know you need 2/3 majority to override Obama's veto.
Yes.
So he's going to have the veto power.
Yes.
Is there anything they can realistically do?
Yes.
Once it just with a simple majority.
Yeah, yes. First of all, a majority is a heck of a lot better than a minority. First of all. But beyond that, if we have both houses, then we will place legislation on his desk. But what will happen is, before that legislation is placed on his desk, there will be a negotiation with him, and particularly given the power of the purse of Congress, and if we have both houses, that power of the purse is infinitely enhanced from simply having one house. If we have both houses of the federal Congress, then related to the power of the purse, I think he will have to negotiate with us on other critical issues.
So could something be done about this Unaffordable Care Act with simple majority?
I certainly hope so. The first piece of legislation, not the only piece, but the first piece that we will place on his desk will be repeal of the medical device tax. that has wide bipartisan support. I am one of the leaders in that area. The district I serve has more pharmaceutical and medical device employees than any other district in the United States, and we will place on his desk, I am confident, a repeal of the medical device tax, and he will have to negotiate with us. And of course we would like a 2/3 majority in both houses, but first things first, let's first get a majority in the United States Senate as well as the House of Representatives. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks to the Congressman. Before we continue, just a little bookkeeping. This is our little contribution, helps defray the cost. If you can, please, whatever you can, contribute. It's appreciated to defray the cost. Our next guest is Frank Fiamingo, who is president of the New Jersey Second Amendment Society. I have seen Frank inspire crowds at rallies across the state and seen him stand up to bullies in Trenton and all the PC folks he's had to fight through, and they've tried to shout him down. We are fortunate to have such a passionate, devoted leader in these times. As a recent Second Amendment Foundation Gun Rights Policy Conference, Frank was awarded the Gun Rights Activist of the Year. Frank and the NJ2AS just played a really key role in getting Shaneen Allen into the PTI, Pretrial Intervention Program, instead of facing jail and a felony record. And while some members of Congress have assured us that ISIS terrorists are already on U.S. soil, some even coming across our southern border, others have insisted that the way to protect us from these gun-toting crazies is to restrict gun ownership. To me, that's insane. So I urge you to support Frank, the NJ2AS, and we welcome to our podium, Frank.
So I'm coming here today. I'm going to change things up a little bit here. I'm not running for anything. I'm not a politician. And somebody asked me earlier, why are my notes so large? And the answer is because I can't read Braille, and my eyesight is gone. And the other thing is that you're going to find, I'm Italian, so we're not going to need a sign language interpreter. So now that I've insulted the sightless, the deaf, and Italians, I'm going to go ahead and start. Obviously, I want to thank Jeff for inviting me here, and the previous speakers for the information that they shared with us this afternoon. It's imperative that we listen to what they have to say and join with them in getting our friends and neighbors, our family members involved in this upcoming fight. And if you don't think it's a fight, I know the people in this room think it's a fight, but maybe those people don't. We need to make sure that they understand that this is a fight and that the stakes are very high. I'm going to start this off like an AA meeting. Hi, my name is Frank, and I'm a New Jersey gun owner. Just hi, Frank. Thank you. This is an undeserved stigma attached. There is an undeserved stigma attached to gun ownership in New Jersey that doesn't exist in a lot of the other states, as I'm sure you're aware. I won't go into all the reasons for why this is true, but I don't think too many people in this room for sure are going to question that. Most people, if you ask them, will tell you that they do believe in the right to self-defense. I mean, if you go up to even the people who say that they're anti-gun, when you speak to them, don't argue with these people. What you really need to do is just sit down and I know there are people that won't get it even if you use logic. But if you say to them, what would you do if if your family, if your children were attacked out in the parking lot here? Do you believe that you have the right to protect them? And of course, 99% of these people are going to say yes. But when you ask them about should they be allowed to possess a gun in order to do that, they lose their minds. So the problem here is, how do we get these people to go from, yes, I believe in the right to self-defense, to understanding that in order to defend yourself, your family, your liberty, and your property, you have to have the means in which to do that. So with a lot of people who are, I always say to people, don't waste your time preaching to the choir. Don't waste your time arguing with the devil. You got to talk to the people in the middle. So if you've got a hardcore liberal, anti-gun person, don't try to change them, because you're just going to talk until your gums bleed. Then we get Joe to come in and fix things. But there are a lot of people in the middle that you can talk to, but you have to be reasonable with them. They didn't, a lot of us didn't just, we weren't born being pro right to carry or being pro, we had to learn. We had to educate ourselves. We read, we were introduced to things by other people. And that's kind of the way that this has to happen. We do have a big problem in the state of New Jersey, and we all recognize this. We've talked about it. The three branches of the New Jersey government have conspired together over a long period of time to deny us the right to protect our lives, liberty, family, and property by carrying a firearm. Now, I know this is a serious charge that I'm making, but I mean it. And I think that if you have any trouble believing me, that the three branches will work against you and forcibly prevent you from carrying a firearm for your protection and the protection of your family, try carrying one outside. And you'll find out very quickly that what I'm saying is true. You'll be arrested and you'll be charged with a second-class felony. In fact, recently, and this is what Jeff alluded to earlier, a young black single mother out of Philly was arrested. Her name was Shanine Allen, by the way. I think you're probably familiar with it. She found out this the hard way. Shanine lives in South Philly, and she had been robbed twice. So she decided to purchase a handgun for her protection and the protection of her two young boys. She went to the trouble of obtaining a Pennsylvania concealed carry permit, which means that your records are thoroughly searched. You go through an FBI criminal background check and a mental health records check to make sure that you don't have a criminal history and that you're not mentally disqualified in some way. Her background came out clean, and she was issued this permit. However, when she crossed the border into New Jersey, she immediately lost her good standing. When she was stopped for a minor traffic offense here in New Jersey. It was a lane change, if I'm not mistaken. Excuse me. And when she was stopped, she voluntarily notified the officer that she was indeed a Pennsylvania carry permit holder and that she did have her locked firearm in her purse. Now, she did that because she thought it was the correct thing to do. And believe me, I can empathize with that. If you're a black person, with a firearm in your car, you want the police officer to you want to voluntarily let them know. That's something we have to work on too, and I have some things to say about that as well. It just depends how much time we have. So what happened? She was immediately arrested and charged with felony gun possession. Now, you got to keep in mind, not only was she not in the process of committing a crime when she was arrested. I mean, she wasn't holding up a Wawa. She wasn't threatening anyone with her gun. She actually volunteered the information. However, that doesn't matter, because in New Jersey, we have something that is aptly named the Graves Act. Now, this unique piece of legislation requires minimum mandatory sentences of up to 10 years in prison for any crime involving a firearm. So what was Miss Allen's crime? It was a simple fact that she had a firearm. How's that for a catch-22? So they use the crime. The crime is the crime is the crime. You know, it's a cyclical reference. So this of course made her eligible for a 10-year prison sentence. Well, I'm not going to go into all the gory details because it's going to take too long. But just suffice it to say that when this all happened, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, the ACLU, all of the other usual suspects, not one of them showed up to stand by Shaneen. Not one of them. In fact, not one liberal Democrat, no, not one liberal Democratic legislator, black, white, male, or female, showed up to stand by Shaneen. You know who did? The Tea Party. The Middlesex County Tea Party in particular, but the Tea Party and the Second Amendment, the members and supporters of the Second Amendment movement. Those are the people who rushed to her side and empathized and felt compassion for what she was going through and donated thousands of dollars to her legal defense, and thousands of dollars. We put up billboards all over Atlantic County. We distributed the FIJA brochures, the Fully Informed Jury Association brochures, all over Atlantic County. We did that week after week after week after week. Who came out? Tea Party members.
Yes, thank you, Tea Party.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for leading us.
All the members and supporters, I can't thank them enough, because without their help, we would have never been able to accomplish what we did, which was get through pressure. We enlisted the leaders, the Second Amendment movement and Tea Party leaders throughout the nation to call into our governor's office and say, I'm from out of state. Why? Well, obviously, especially the people from Iowa and New Hampshire, okay, we had them call our governor's office and say, hey, I'm from out of state. What's happening to this woman is unconscionable. So you need to do something about it. Now, he said, well, there's nothing I can do, and so forth and so on. But that's not true. And as it turned out, the appropriate pressure was put on the Attorney General, who put the appropriate pressure on the prosecutor, and there was a clarification made, and we were able to save Shaneen Allen from going to prison for 10 years. And instead, she's going into a pretrial intervention program, which is basically probation. She gets 24 hours of community service, and she doesn't even have to show up in New Jersey. She's just got to pick up the phone and call and say, I'm here. So anyway, some people ask me, why didn't she just get a New Jersey carry permit? Well, for that, to answer that question, I suggest that you attempt to obtain a carry permit for a firearm in New Jersey, and you will quickly discover that in order to carry arms in New Jersey as a civilian, you must demonstrate a specific, immediate threat to your life that cannot be avoided in any other fashion. Now, obviously, that's intended as a barrier to prevent anyone from, getting a carry permit. But here's the thing: just the very fact of having to obtain a permit is ridiculous. We're talking about to exercise a right that is clearly identified in the United States Constitution as an individual right of the people. It is akin to requiring you to get a permit to worship where you wish, or to assemble, or to speak freely. The right to keep and bear arms is no less a pre-existing inalienable right than any of the other rights in the Bill of Rights. So why are we expected to submit to this obvious infringement? But guns are dangerous, as some people say. Shouldn't they be prohibited? And the answer is yes, guns are dangerous. And no, they should not be prohibited. You know, everybody in this room is informed enough to understand that people with evil intent will always find a way to get their hands on whatever instrument they need to create their particular brand of havoc and mayhem. Whether it's a hammer, a knife, a blowtorch, a gas can, or a gun, in the hands of an evil or demented individual, almost anything can be dangerous. It's all the more reason why we, as free individuals, should be prepared to protect our lives, loved ones, liberty, and property from those who would initiate the use of force against us. And this preparation most certainly includes the bearing of arms. Now, how we arrived at this point in New Jersey where we are doesn't really matter. The common verbiage involves the boiling of frogs, you know. It's more important that we quickly arrive at the conclusion that it's hot as hell in here and we need to jump the bleep out as quickly as possible. But how do we go about reversing years of brainwashing and media bias and a liberal education, which apparently was taken quite literally? Well, one thing I can tell you, we can't do it incrementally, because personally I don't have the time. You know, I don't think I have that much time. If you woke up from a deep sleep only to find someone with their hands around your throat, you're not going to stop to figure out how did they get in the house or why is it that they're trying to strangle you. You're just going to get their hands off your throat. Well, that's where we are here in New Jersey. Believe it or not, this state has a great heritage from colonial times of being a leader in both politically and economically. Well, this was until we became strangled by our own legislation. Now is the time for every resident in the state of New Jersey to ask themselves the question, do I accept the prohibition of my rights to defend my life, liberty, family, and property? Am I going to resign myself to the fact that even though the government cannot guarantee my safety or that of my family, that they still refuse to allow me to take the responsibility upon myself? Furthermore, if you choose not to take the responsibility, that's fine. But do you have the right then to prevent other people from taking that responsibility? And of course the answer is no. Would you grant them, other people, the right to make those critical decisions about your life? So obviously, this is a subject that cannot be covered, thoroughly in a few minutes. I recommend to anyone who's interested, please go to our site, nj2as.com. That's NJ like New Jersey, 2A like the Second Amendment, nj2as.com. And find out more about our association. I ask you to take a look around, see what we're all about, and when you decide, not if you decide, when you decide you like what you see, please join as a member and become actively involved in this fight. It's easy, you can join online. I want to thank you all very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Will you take a couple of questions? Yeah, if there's time, questions.
Does anybody have any? Yes.
There's a comment. The reason why we have gun licensing is every day of marriage license. Marriage license will prevent interracial marriage, and gun permits originally started to prevent free blacks from owning guns. And the reason why they're still in favor is because they don't want free blacks to own guns. Tell that to you.
Yeah, I believe that still is the case, as a matter of fact, because where is the largest push against for gun control? It's from the inner cities.
That's how it started, and it hasn't changed. And just tell
I agree. I agree. Yes.
A question. I know there's been some movement across the country as far as those who have right to carry in other states, when they do visit states that do have it, like New Jersey.
We're talking about national reciprocity.
That's correct.
Absolutely. And that's something that hopefully this situation with Shaneen Allen will change, is it brings this to the attention. Now, if you have a valid carry permit from another state, that should be good throughout the entire United States, because when she crossed the border from Pennsylvania into New Jersey, she didn't leave the United States. She had that right to carry and protect her life and family. So, we will be pushing very hard for that. We were pushing hard for it before the elementary school shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary, and then everything went down, from there. Yes, ma'am?
How do you get the right to carry? How did you?
Well, we're born with the right. Yeah, the permit.
Yeah, the permit.
I don't. No one. Most civilians in the state of New Jersey. No, you cannot, because they will not grant it to you unless you have an immediate threat to your life that cannot be avoided in any other way, which is a ridiculous.
Last question.
Yes.
Yes, I would like to ask you, Frank, and perhaps everyone in the audience, had that person from Oklahoma, had he been in New Jersey, who would have been the civilian that was concealed carrying to save the rest of the people from the rest of the possible carnage?
Good point.
No one.
And that's why when people say, well, you know, school zones should be gun free and so, that's ridiculous. I mean, I want my children protected, and if I have a qualified individual carrying, you know, that has a carry permit in the area, I feel much more comfortable that there's not going to be something that would happen in Sandy Hook. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're just about to introduce our final speaker, but before I have several thank yous. Rob Goldberg and his mom. Rob is our cameraman, and he is the purveyor of First Amendment TV. Rob, would you stand up and we really thank him, because this is all his time and expense to come here and film this and then put it online for posterity. Also, we're Sue. Speaking of Middlesex County Republican Women's Club,
Yeah.
thank you very much for coming and supporting us and for what you've done for Shinny Allen and many others. And lastly, Patty Page. Patty, thank you very much for your support, Assistant Chair of Morris County, right? Thank you all. And with that, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our final speaker, a new Jack. He's been in politics for only some 40-some-odd years. He is a very strong believer in fiscal policy. He wants to repeal Obamacare and redirect subsidies into a refundable tax credit in a much better and smarter health care program. He believes in robust energy policy. Quite appropriately, he is a strong Second Amendment supporter and is firmly pro-life. After winning the June primary in New Jersey, he was immediately listed as a prohibitive 40-plus point underdog to Cory Booker. But you know what, folks? Recently, thanks to the president and his failed policies, among likely voters, the race is now single digits. There is a debate coming up, is it the 25th, Jeff, against Cory Booker. Urge all of your friends to watch, participate, and support who we hope will be the next senator from New Jersey, Jeff Bell.
Jeff. I don't know if you've noticed, but Cory Booker is attacking me about once or twice a day, and the description that he uses about me, I think, is very indicative. He calls me a Tea Party senator. He even called my book a Tea Party book. I don't have any problem with that. I'm very proud of it. But what I want to ask is, what is the problem he has with the Tea Party? The Tea Party, as I understand it, is a movement that began in 2009, shortly after Mr. Obama took office, and it wants to get back to the basic principles of the Declaration and the Constitution. And he seems to think that this is something that the voters of New Jersey should be afraid of. I think he's wrong. I don't think, from everywhere I've been in the last 8 months, I don't think there's anybody in New Jersey that is afraid of that. We are eager to have it, especially after the last 6 years. President Obama acts as if the Constitution isn't there. Mr. Booker has replaced his pro-Obama themes, because of the polls, with a new theme, which is bipartisanship. And he has 2 or 3 trivial bills that he's co-sponsored with Rand Paul and Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. It's kind of an insurance policy against them doing that much for me, but it's also an insurance policy against being accused of being a phony bipartisan person. Because President Obama also will pay lip service to bipartisanship. He even plays lip service to bipartisanship on things like immigration reform. But whenever there's some kind of a negotiation, how do you negotiate with a president who says, I want 95%, that's my idea of negotiation, and if you don't give me exactly what I want, I will walk out of here and issue an executive order implementing it anyway. That's not bipartisanship. That is the image or the phoniness of bipartisanship, but the president really has no interest in accomplishing things that need to be done with Republicans. I'm not sure how much he has in mind to accomplish other than taking control of all of American life and having everything be a top-down decision by Washington. Now let's take one example that I ran into recently. I decided that I would go ahead and present to the New Jersey Education Association. Senator Booker was there. He spoke first. I spoke second. Whenever that happens, even if we're in the same place and speaking back to back, he leaves by a different exit so that he doesn't have to say hello to me in any way. Why he does that, you'll have to ask him, because I've only met him one time in my life, and that was when I came up to him at a Labor Day festival and shook his hand. It was certainly very cordial for the 2 or 3 minutes that we talked, and he certainly doesn't want to see me in a debate. He was negotiating for 3 debates. All of them would have been televised. His representatives were there negotiating, let's have this ground rule or that moderator, but then he withdrew at the last minute when everything was about to be agreed on, so he withdrew from 2 out of the 3. The remaining one is going to be that weekend that includes October 25th. However, it's going to be taped on October 24th in Channel 6 Trenton Bureau, the Philadelphia station, and then broadcast at 5 o'clock on Sunday the 26th. Yes, it's during an NFL Sunday, but I do think that people who have been starved for any kind of a debate will be very interested in that. Anyway, getting back to the New Jersey Education Association, which, believe it or not, I almost forgot about. He spoke first, I spoke second. I knew I am not going to get their endorsement, I didn't. But I wanted to give them a chance to question me. I believe in question and answer. I believe in debate. I do it wherever I go. And most of what I had to say to the NJEA was most unwelcome. But there was one exception, one applause line. And that applause line was when I said the so-called Common Core educational system is something that will put a straitjacket on teachers and not permit them to have any spontaneity or creativity in their profession. I got an ovation. So, Mr. Booker seems to think that the term Tea Party is a synonym for extremism. But I submit to you that caring about the observation, the observance of the Declaration and the Constitution is not extremism to the American people. And there are many issues, not just Common Core, where we can make common cause with people even on the left, like the teachers union, because they want control over everybody, even people like most teachers who agree with their agenda. And I think Mr. Booker is making a sad mistake in assuming that Tea Party is a dirty word. And I also think he's making a mistake in his lack of interest in debating. Some of you know that I was the nominee for the same Senate seat 36 years ago. At that time, I was the youngest Senate nominee in the country. Now I'm the oldest. But I am still the same person. I would want to reassure you of that. And Bill Bradley was my opponent. He was far further ahead in the polls than Cory Booker has ever been ahead of me, and yet he accepted 21 debates, which were scheduled. Now, why did he do that? There were a couple of reasons. One is that Mr. Bradley wanted to improve as a debater, and he figured the early debates in June, July, August wouldn't be covered all that much, and he'd learn a lot of my moves. That's kind of the way he operated as an athlete, too. He wasn't known for native physical ability. He was known as somebody who practiced a lot with weights in his shoes and all that. Well, he got to practice debating with me, and people who thought he was crazy to accept 21 debates weren't so sure after he got much better and gave a good account of himself in the later debates. I think I still won them, but all he had to do was hold his own. He had started out with such a huge lead. The other thing is, the other reason he accepted that number of debates, I think, is that was a time when the Democratic Party and the left were much more self-confident in their views vis-a-vis conservatives. I think they were just about as wrong, but they knew what the meaning of the word debate is. They wanted to air the issues, and they thought that at the other end of that, they would come out on top. They were right sometimes, they were not always right. But now, I believe the reason Mr. Booker is running away from debates, and hardly ever, by the way, even in press events or normal speeches to ordinary audiences, which he hasn't had that many of here in New Jersey, he doesn't take questions. He doesn't want to be questioned. And I think this is the fundamental way in which the left has changed. They don't believe in debate because they're not used to it. They're used to name-calling, demonizing, criminalizing anyone who dares to oppose them, and they have totally forgotten how to debate the issues. They're wrong on those issues, but they can't even come up with a rationale. They can't even come up with a line of reasoning that makes any sense to the average voter, and besides, it's much easier to scream about Tea Party, war on women, whatever their latest mantra is, rather than have a rational debate on the issues. That is the thing that has changed the most. I have been running for 8 months. I have a specific program to improve the economy. It has to do with returning the dollar to its backing in gold for the first time in 43 years. And the reason it's doable now, in a practical sense, is that the Federal Reserve and Janet Yellen, the chairwoman of the Federal Reserve Board, has no idea how to get out of this horrible zero interest rate policy that is making it impossible for most Americans to save, that is making it very difficult for small business to get the kind of capital they need from community banks. Community banks are going out of business or being acquired. They have so little ability and so little incentive to lend at the tiny interest rates they can get for taking a risk. But the Fed is afraid of two different things. And unfortunately, the reason I'm here and running is that Congress shares in this fear. The fear that Congress has is if interest rates return to their normal market level, all of a sudden the deficit would be much harder to finance. This incredible increased debt we've run up in the last 6 years. Ultimately, it's unsustainable, but right now there's the illusion that it is sustainable. Why is that? They use disappearing, trivial, short-term interest rates to finance the deficit. Each new deficit as it comes along, and the Fed is printing money every year to enable them to do that. Congress knows, even smart conservatives, some of whom I've talked to off the record, know that Congress is pulling their eggs out of the fire. They are printing the money to finance this debt, and as a result, there's much less pressure on Congress to reduce federal spending, to return to a limited government concept that the Tea Party supports, than there would otherwise be. As one example, if short-term interest rates return to normal levels, the deficit would go up $800 billion a year. That's a big increase in the deficit. It would make Congress look very bad and put great pressure on them to do something instead of talking about do something doing something about this unsustainable debt that we're rolling up. The other thing that makes the Fed afraid is Wall Street. Wall Street is having a party. I don't know if you noticed, but anyone who has a portfolio is feeling pretty good. It may be a guilty feeling of feeling good because they know investors who have been able to borrow very cheaply. That's the paradox. It's very hard for people who need a loan to get a loan, but people who don't need a loan, it's very easy for them, and they're borrowing that money and putting it into leveraged investment, which leads to new bubbles, which is the next bubble that's going to burst. I'm not smart enough to tell you, but we all know that it's going to happen, just like it did to the residential real estate market in 2007. But if the Fed let interest rates return to normal levels, investors and savers could at least get a normal return if they went for a relatively safe investment in bonds or some kind of commercial paper. And that would take away the artificial bull market that we have had in recent years. Wall Street doesn't want that. Wall Street is overwhelmingly in favor of President Obama, and the word overwhelmingly goes out the window when we talk about their support for Senator Booker. That is 100%. They have rules against supporting Republicans that I found out about in my fundraising in the last few weeks. Wall Street is having a party. They know it isn't going to last forever, but as long as it does, they don't want anything about a return to normal policy by the Fed. So that is the reason why Washington is a bind. That's why that bind is why I came back, returning to New Jersey politics for the first time in over 30 years, because I couldn't get anyone else to deal with it. It's the 800-pound gorilla, the gorilla in the room that nobody wants to challenge or even talk about. And here's the kicker. It is why a major, long-needed step that's also not being talked about until this campaign, which is returning to the gold-backed dollar, the system that served this country well for all but the last 43 years in one form or another, is easier. It's less risky to do that than to risk a stock market crash, a financial liquidity crisis, or all the other things that could happen if the Fed merely ended its ridiculous zero interest rate policy. Just the other day, I saw Janet Yellen quoted as saying, well, it's going to be even further into the future when we can afford to raise any short-term interest rates. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now been 6 years. They say that we're in recovery. President Obama thinks that everybody's better off than they were 6 years ago. He said that on 60 Minutes.
They just don't know it.
And they don't know it. It's a PR problem. And when the moderator asked them, well, why do you think they don't know it? His answer was, because their wages haven't gone up. Wait a minute, that's not a PR problem. That is the problem, Mr. President. We have a recovery that doesn't allow anybody but a handful of wealthy people to recover. And he thinks that if he tells them in a dramatic enough way, using new arguments and new phrases and new gimmicks, that they will then know that they are much better off than they were 6 years ago. I don't think it's going to fly. That is why President Obama's numbers have collapsed in this state in a way that nobody expected. He's actually below, a point or two below, his national approval rating in New Jersey, a state that he won just 2 years ago by 18 percentage points. It's as if the disillusionment in this state is in accord, is proportional to the original hope and optimism that many voters in this state were hoping for. And that is why President Obama is coming in here, but his event will be off the record. Because Cory Booker never mentions him anymore. He'll be at that fundraising event, but it's a private fundraising event where he will not be quoted, not be photographed with Senator Booker. And Senator Booker wants it that way. President Obama has become a dirty word in this, one of his strongest states. And that is why, despite a couple of pollsters who want you to believe this race is over, that Booker is above 50%, which is supposed to be the key thing for an incumbent, it is, but they're allocating all the undecided voters to him and me. And that is the big reason why a couple of polls have found that. Another one that came out just a day or two ago found Booker was ahead 49 to 40, but it found that his negative rating, his approval rating had gone up to, the disapproval rating had gone up to 42%. It was 50 to 42 positive. My approval rating was the highest it's ever been, 38 to 18 positive. That isn't enough. I got to get up into the 40s and 50s to win, but Senator Booker knows that a victory is possible because otherwise he would not be attacking me every day. He has his own internal polls. He has a very well-financed campaign. All the bells and whistles are there. And if I were out of this race, if this race were decided, if everyone had decided, even though the race has been very low-key compared to other statewide races, if it were decided, you wouldn't hear him attacking me. You wouldn't hear him having Obama in the state, but only secretly, as opposed to having an open press event. And that's why those of us in this room should not listen to those who say, Cory Booker is an icon, Cory Booker is a superstar. The bloom has come off the rose, ladies and gentlemen. This is a winnable race, and if the current trends continue through November 4th, you're going to have the first Republican U.S. Senator in the last, how many years is it since I beat Case? Let's see, no, it's about 40 years, 1972, 42 years. I have a good feeling about this, and I think the Democrats, given what's happened with President Obama, they have an increasingly uneasy feeling about it. Thank you very much.
Everybody you know, remember to take Obama's policies into the voting booth. The president said every one of them is there. Will you take some questions?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, folks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you hear that Obamacare isn't that much of an issue. I wanted to say that in New Jersey it is. October 1st, I received a letter from Horizon Blue Cross that due to the Affordable Care Act, my health insurance policy was no longer renewable. So the new policy that I had to take to keep my doctor and hospitals, and I'm a healthy person, I don't need a lot of insurance, but the new policy costs for my family $500 a month more. That's $6,000 extra for health insurance, and like I said, that is as of October 1st. And I'm sure a lot of other families got the same letter that started during the summer saying, you better make new plans for insurance because we can't renew it anymore.
And they'll be getting them over the next couple of weeks.
Affordable Care Act.
Yep.
So it's a major issue right now.
Absolutely right. You are not unique, sir. At a fundraising event I was at a week ago Friday, a couple had just gotten their letter in the mail that day. Now the 800,000 figure that in a study that came out about 7 or 8 months ago was for those who had been kicked off their insurance, lost their physician, or had significantly increased premiums. Like I said, that's a 7 or 8 month old study, and I'll bet it's up to 1 million people in New Jersey who have been hurt by what I always call the Affordable Care Act. It is always a laugh line. I never call it Obamacare. Let's make clear that when they come out with bills like Common Core, the Affordable Care Act, and the Fed's printing of money, deciding how much money that each American needs to have in his pocket or her pocket, it's always a lie. It's always about the government in Washington controlling everything. And nothing is clearer about, in that regard, than the so-called Affordable Care Act. Yes, sir.
Isn't Cory Booker a strong supporter of that act?
Yes, he is. Not only that, I'm glad you reminded me, which is that in a debate when he was running in the special election for his one-year term last year in the primary, Cory Booker, in that debate against Rush Holt and Congressman, who was the other congressman, Pallone, called the Affordable Care Act a great program. A great program. I don't know how there could be a greater gulf between two candidates or two parties than on that. Admittedly, he used that term, a great program, before the website had crashed, But nobody thought it was a great program even back then. And this is who he is. He's never disagreed with Obama, never voted against him on anything, and that's not going to change. And I think voters have to think about, and I think they are thinking about, how do I register a disagreement with the status quo, whether it's Obamacare or zero interest rates or Common Core. There's only one way, and that's to vote up and down the Republican ticket, at the top beginning with me, with Leonard Lance, and everyone else in the county offices who's running. That's the only way, and I think a lot of it is going to happen. Yes, sir?
Do you have a website where we can
Yes.
donate?
It's bell2014.com. You can contribute, go on that website and contribute with your credit card, or we have post office box addresses. It happens to be Post Office Box, Bell for Senate, Post Office Box 31, Palisades Park, New Jersey, 07650.
And you also have that information on our website. We have the information for the Jeff Bell campaign. You can just click on it, it'll take you right there.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Isn't Cory Booker vulnerable on his record as mayor of Newark?
Very much so, very much so.
It hasn't been brought out, and of course you've got the media against you, but
Well, they somehow never get around to pulling together everything. Everything that happened as mayor of Newark to him and to the city has come out in public. I don't know anything that hasn't appeared in public, but an ad started late last week, not my ad, an independent expenditure ad that said, how does somebody get rich while in public office? $700,000 from his law firm, a so-called high-tech startup that he was caught. He would have made over $3 million on it. That's how he valued it, but then he withdrew from it when the New York Times exposed it. And, you know, I think it does add up to something significant. Yes?
This morning, Cory Booker was on TV with a replacement for Michael Aaron.
Yes.
And, he went on and on for at least 5 minutes in describing how you were a carpetbagger, quote unquote, an extremist over and over again, a rigid ideologue. So we talk about attack. That was his only...
Yeah, unfortunately, I got a heads up on that. It was first broadcast last night, and I came in, I saw 22 out of the 30 minutes, but I didn't hear the part where he had all those kind thoughts about me. But it does underline the fact that he's running scared. He's nervous about the possibility of a massive vote coming out against the status quo and what's happening. Yes, sir.
Yes, do you think we could ever repeal the 17th Amendment, which I believe is the one where it was changed a while ago, where the state legislatures used to vote the senators, then it got changed where we went to a popular vote for senators.
No, I don't think that can change back. This is, incidentally, this is the 100th anniversary of the direct election of senators. The first time it was universal in the wake of the 17th Amendment was 1914, exactly 100 years ago in this election cycle. And I'm of two minds about it. I'm in favor of direct election of senators, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here having won a primary. I'm for the direct primary, I'm for initiative and referendum and all those reforms. But it is true, as the critics say, that it undermined the ability of the states to have their own say in Washington, because the senators were the delegates of the states at that time. Don't think it's ever going to change back, but I think we have to find other means of revitalizing the power of the states for unable people to run their own lives at the most local possible level.
Last question, Israel.
Oh, good. Can you ask for equal time on that TV program?
I already appeared on it. I accept everything. I had Michael Aaron. He had a health problem after I was on, and this woman who interviewed Senator Booker yesterday is a substitute. I thought she served up quite a few softball questions. But I think it's better for a candidate if you don't get softball questions. Michael Aaron I've known him for over 30 years. He's one of the few people who's still on duty from my previous race, which was in 1982. He was right in that slot at that time. And we had a great interview. He asked hard-hitting questions. I had heard them before, and I was able to answer them, and I got quite a few good reviews on that interview. But no, there's no possibility of equal time because it's already happened.
Patty?
Is there any way that we can get bumper stickers or signs? Or how would we go about doing it?
Well, this, as many of you know, this has been a comparatively impoverished campaign. It's the most unpleasant surprise I had compared to my 2 other Senate races in which I raised, I guess, a total of about $4 million. And that was in late 70s, early 80s dollars. That was a lot more money if you did the costs that's equivalent to now. But I've had trouble raising money. I'm still short of $500,000 in the 8 months I've been in the race. The one thing we do have is a good palm card that shows me sitting around a table with some other fellows when Ronald Reagan was announcing for president at the first time, and I'm proud to have been one of his policy advisors starting in 1974 and off and on continuing through 1986, the day the Tax Reform Act of '86 passed. Yes?
Suggestion that maybe the county chairs, we can get the word out, the county chairs then.
Yes. Yeah, here's one thing that we're thinking of doing that's consistent with our lack of money, which is my public relations advertising person is going to create a bumper sticker that can be downloaded on the internet. In other words, we're going to take it onto the internet and have people download it if they so wish as a PDF. And that idea just came up Thursday or Friday, and I hope we'll make it happen within a couple of days.
Cool.
Thank you for asking.
Cool. Regarding your financial support, are you getting any significant support from the National Republican Senate Committee?
National? No. They've been completely stonewalling me, and I think other than the fact that I'm too conservative for them, I think it's that I am critical of the Federal Reserve and their Wall Street money. There is still some Wall Street money going to Republicans, and that money does not want to see anybody saying that the Fed's zero interest rate policy has to come to an end. A friend of mine asked the Senate Campaign Committee. By the way, the Senate Campaign Committee was very different in 1978. Just like Bill Bradley was different from Cory Booker, that Bill Bradley gave me 21 debates, the Senate Campaign Committee fully funded my campaign with the equivalent of more than $1 million in aid. And I was never as close in the polls to Bill Bradley as I was right from the beginning to Cory Booker. So it wasn't a matter of he's way behind in the polls. It's really who I am, I think, more than anything else that led me not to get involved in that led them not to get involved in this race. But I have to also say, on the other side of that coin, the Republican Party in New Jersey is very united. Governor Christie has headlined 2 fundraisers for me, and the state committee, we're working closely with them on turnout operations. And I haven't met many Republicans anywhere in New Jersey or even heard about any who are considering a vote for Cory Booker. Thank you very much.
And unless there are any other questions, I'd like to thank all of you, and please remember, November 4th is the most critical election in our lifetimes. It is a game changer. We have to vote for our people, vote Republican, vote against the president's policies. Thank you all very much for your support, and hope to see you at the next one.